Hi, this is Judi Bonilla with Encore Chat, and today I'm talking to Linda O'Keefe. She's an LCSW living in San Diego and has a company called A Radical Shift. And today we're talking about some of the issues that come up for entrepreneurs and how they can move forward. Linda, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what we were discussing on Twitter.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the ups and downs of entrepreneurism and realizing that is part of being an entrepreneur. And in your practice, what do you see that? It sounds simple, but I'm beginning to think it isn't. It isn't as simple as that that's part of the process. So can you speak to that, or what are your thoughts?
It isn't as simple that the ups and downs are part of the process. Is that what you're asking me?
Right, because as an entrepreneur, we know there will be, but I think it's different when you actually feel it, when you've lost investment funding.
Absolutely. So, it's almost like anything else we can talk about. We have an intellectual understanding, oh yeah, I know I'm probably going to try something. It may or may not work and that'll be fine and blah, blah, blah. But when we're in it, and I think one of the things that I wrote on the Twitter feed is that I truly believe is that entrepreneurs are truly a courageous bunch of human beings. I mean, they are like on my favorite list for courage there, because it takes a lot to step out, particularly if your business is part of your heart and soul. If you're doing what you're here to do in the world and you're setting up a business around that, man, it's not just that you're creating a business where you're selling widgets. You're putting yourself out there, as to who you really are. So when things happen and there's an up and there's a down and you don't understand, what might be going on, it feels very personal.
Right.
And so then it can trigger all kinds of personal stuff like, whatever might be an underlying fear, like, I never do it right, or, whatever. We all have these.
Wow. And that was going to be my next question, because when you talked about courage, I also hear the underlying current of being vulnerable. And if you're being vulnerable, everything from your past is now up front and on offer to everyone else. So I'm thinking, talk to us about that. As an entrepreneur, you are more likely to come up, all the things that you may have thought you dealt with and haven't are going to come forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. That is why it is courageous. It is courageous because you really kind of step into a ring where you're going to be tested for some of the things just in the normal life of being an entrepreneur and starting a business and going through finances and learning things. And are you going to run this, or are you going to hand it over to somebody else, or, getting clients or whatever? All of it is kind of a challenge for what really are the deepest truths all of us have about failure or loss, or whether there's something wrong with us, because we should have known better, about being accountable to ourselves in a way where we're not beating ourselves up, because that does not serve us to keep being a leader either, Okay. So it absolutely opens us up to those kind of vulnerabilities. Yes.
All right. So what I'm hearing is, if we've had issues around relationships, that'll manifest it somewhere along the entrepreneur timeline.
Mm-hmm.
If we've had issues around money, if we've had issues around trust.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing with that is, we often hear limiting beliefs in the entrepreneurial world, and we also hear self-sabotaging. Mm-hmm. Are those part of the triggers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's like, I don't even know a better way to say it. It's because you don't know it until it happens, but you get triggered by, I think you were mentioning to me earlier something about, so you lose your third investor or something. And with that, you may lose your whole business, because and there you are, smack dab face in front of this piece about, not only failing, but like, why didn't I know better? Or why is this happening? Or we get into that mode where, we think something's being done to us. Or, I mean, people handle it all different ways, but the bottom line is it can be some gnarly fears. And it is, you're totally right. It's around almost every level. If we have issues around finances or being wealthy or having money flow or something, and that'll get triggered. And maybe you had a relationship with the investor, right, and you feel like betrayed now, and all of those things can be part of it.
So I'm also thinking that as we pay money for marketing, I'll say consultants, somebody to develop our SEO strategy, someone to develop our website, we also need I'll say have a coach or someone, or how do we address this? Because most people walk onto entrepreneurism knowing it'll be challenging, but not knowing that it's going to be emotionally challenging. Because I never got that before until I had this conversation on Twitter chat and thought, oh, sounds like a lot like therapy.
Yeah. Well, and it is. I mean, it is sort of like taking yourself through therapy, sort of like I tell couples when I work with them too, a good solid, relationship where you're trying to be intimate with somebody. If you have some issues around trust, is going to take you directly. It's going to be a therapeutic relationship. That's what's going to happen. I mean, because it is going to bring that stuff up that is just the biggest fears you have.
Yeah. So our businesses actually might be an opportunity for transformational change in our personal lives.
They are probably as an entrepreneur, it's probably one of the best opportunities for transformation in our life. Because again, this is why they're courageous. I mean, we basically put ourselves in the line of creating something that comes out of us that we're usually attached to, that we care about, putting it out into the world and having it be something that flows through the world, and any kind of thing that comes back to us that could be negative or hard or feel like a failure, it's like a personal loss.
Yeah. Oh,
it's painful.
It's and here's what people don't understand. It's physically painful.
Yeah.
It's visceral. And when people talk at a cellular level, as an entrepreneur, failure or setback, it's at the heart level. And that's why we hear about being stuck. We hear about self-sabotage. One of the things that came up on my radar is the why we do things, because we all have a why if we ask.
Yes.
And then the other part of that was why not? And that's when I thought I really clued into the possibility of our limiting beliefs affecting how we actually run our businesses. And is that why we lose the third investor? Is there a pattern?
There can be. And the limiting beliefs, partially we bring with us into whatever it is we're doing, because normally they've started a long time ago. They're not something that just showed up when you got into entrepreneurship,
Right.
But I think the reason, this is my own personal opinion, that one of the reasons people get so stuck is because when those come up, if we don't have a way to process through them and literally let them go. So that is a form of a grief process. That is literally a form of acknowledging a loss and, saying, you know what, does that really serve me anymore to believe that no matter who I have investing in my business, they're probably going to drop out because people just don't stay with me, or whatever that limiting belief is. Right. If you can't process through that and say, and really let that go, not just an intellectual, but an emotional level, then of course you're going to be completely stuck, because what's going to happen is you're going to go forward and get a new investor, and you've got a whole other part of you going, oh no, I know exactly what's going to happen. Why should I do that?
Wow, I'm gonna just take your attention. Oscar's with us, and he mentioned earlier that he has a fear of failing, which is why he doesn't take the next step. Oscar, if you're still there, let us know if you want to jump in. But again, it's okay. So that could be what's holding people back from actually starting their startup, because I don't know about you. I work in a co-working space. So often I see people working forever on their mission statement, forever on a logo. And it's like, just start something.
I know.
I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because we know there's revision. So it almost seems like we need to do a little bit of work on ourselves. Or does it even happen that way? What do you see?
Well, if you're not doing work on yourself at all, and you're probably going to get stopped at some point in a way that you almost cannot move forward. Especially if you're up to playing some kind of a big game, because there just isn't a human being that doesn't have some of those fears. It just doesn't. It's not that. It's just not in the human life that we don't have some of those fears. We're all in good company with that. And then I think the reason, the big, thing in the middle, the elephant in the middle of the living room for people is that if there is, so maybe I'm speaking to Oscar right now, if this is helpful, a fear of failure, or some kind of loss or some kind of losing face or whatever, all of that is tied to shame.
Wow.
So what happens is we grow up and we go through our life and something happens and somebody says, or whatever they say to us. And then in our bodies and in our souls and in our hearts, it's this feeling like, oh my God, that just feels so horrible. That's just a horrible feeling. I never want to feel that again.
Yeah.
And so that will stop you short every time. So if you fear that if you fail, you are then now a whatever it is, worthless, you're not good enough, never good enough, whatever is the source of that shame, then why would you start? You wouldn't even want to start down that road. And you can limit how successful your business is because you can just get to a certain level and then it's like, oh, if I go past that, then I might hit that wall. And that's so fascinating is that we just somehow know what's going to bring us to that.
Right.
So we resist and we take a long time creating our logo and whatever it is we're doing. Yeah.
So is there a self-check that we can do? Like, is there a 10-point? I don't know. I'm asking this in sincerity. Is there a 10-point checklist? Like, if you do, does this make you feel this way? Is there a way to a shame scale? You know how they have stress scales?
Isn't that
is there a
interesting?
shame scale? Is there anything like that so we can do a self-diagnosis? Like, I really need to look at this part of my being so I can be successful.
I don't know of one.
Okay.
To be honest.
Okay.
But, the woman okay, so that is actually an interesting challenge because it would be a cool thing to create. So now you got me thinking. Because it would be helpful for people, I think. But the person that sort of comes the closest, and I'm just going to actually call her out because I think a lot of her work is really important, is Brené Brown.
Yes.
Who did her work on the TED Talk on the power of vulnerability and how powerful shame is in our lives and how it keeps us from connection. It keeps us from many things. But really, there are some lists of the most common shame sources that we have. And that is something I could find a way to share if that would be helpful to people.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. And one of the things I'm actually tweeting as we talk here, which is kind of distracting for everyone. But that power of vulnerability. And when you share those intimate feelings, not everyone can meet you at that same level because they have to deal with their own stuff as well. And it's really, it can bring up, I'll say, what I saw in my mind was minimizing your feelings when you're feeling what you're feeling.
I would not just say not everybody can deal with it. I would say most people can deal with it. So it's very important to have a group of people. I don't care if it's just 2 or 3 people. If it's more, that's awesome. But people who will sit there and just say, wow, I get it. That's hard. Not try to talk you out it. Not try to say, oh, but wait, just get back up on your horse and make that next list for your thing you're going to do tomorrow. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Let's take time to process this because guess what? The deeper you process this and get it, not only do you make the most of the opportunity you have to grow from that,
Right.
but you come out the other side even more inspired, more clear,
Right.
and more able to move forward in a really powerful way.
So what I'm hearing, and again, because I'm framing in that entrepreneur space, that's the power of masterminds.
Masterminds are wonderful for that. And I would suggest that people find a mastermind that really fits them. So I've been in masterminds where it's been just a little too, for me,
Right.
a little too intellectual, and they stay on that level of up here. Oh yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Let's just get to your list. What did you do? What did you not do? There are masterminds around where people really are able to talk about, this felt like a failure. It was really hard for me. And everybody just goes, you're in a room full of people that experience that every other day. So we totally get it. What do we need? How can we help you? You know? And that's what we need, because again, if you go back to Brene Brown's work, it's like she's talking for me or something. Empathy is the antidote to those things. Empathy, or the ability to just say, I get it, I hear you. That's it. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to tell people they need to think differently. We don't have to force them to, push past it, shake it off, or whatever people say. Again, because so in the work that I've done over the years, the most transformation I see is when people are willing to kind of go to the bottom of it and be there. And then it'll let go of you.
Right.
It'll let go of you.
Yeah.
It's a feeling, it's an energy that just needs to kind of let go of you. And when it's received, it'll move through, and then it'll be a relief.
So I'm almost hearing we need that validation, and that's where a mastermind validation of our feeling that's intrinsically part of who we are. And then we need to release that. And, when you were talking, I got in my head the Wizard of Oz. What we perceive something to be, like I'll say the boogeyman, the fear, even when I think Harry Potter, the name that goes, we dare not speak, the name we don't talk about because it has that power. But once we talk about it, the power, it no longer has that power over us.
Exactly.
Wow. This is Encore Chat, and we're having a conversation with Linda O'Keefe talking about what entrepreneurs can do to move forward in their business. And so much of it, as Linda's been talking about, is identifying maybe, I'll say, where we have areas to work on. Is that what it was? I think
it's the fear. Okay. I just think it's the fear. I think if we're stuck, we probably need to know we're in some kind of fear.
Okay. All right.
I think if we're having a feeling like, I've been betrayed, if we hear ourselves things like nobody ever and nothing and never will I ever, you already know you're triggered at a much deeper level than what's going on.
Could you say that again for anyone who might have missed that?
Sure. When you hear yourself thinking or saying things like, oh, it never works, or I know, and always, these people always do this to me, these words that are not adult, they're not even adult words, they're children words. Okay. Then you're triggered for something way deeper than the circumstance. And until you pay attention to that trigger, you are either going to play that trigger out with them and go, you bad people, or whatever you want to do. You always mess me up, which doesn't get you anywhere in business.
No, I actually was dealing with that earlier in the week, and I really had to reel myself back in.
Gets you nowhere in business. So you have to kind of get on top of it and know that it's a trigger, and say, oh, this is a trigger for me, and be willing to kind of look at what it is. So what is this fear that's going on for me? Maybe what is this feeling? Maybe you feel ashamed. Maybe you just feel like that you just lost something that you don't even know what to do with. Maybe it is a feeling of betrayal, but it's sort of like, okay, but if you make that about the person in your business that you're working with, that's not the full story.
Now that makes sense. And so my next question to you, as you talked about that, do we need to identify what it is, or do we just accept it? Because I'll say some of us, and I don't know if I can include myself. We don't need to know what the question is or what the root is. We just need to know that there's something there that's not feeling good. Or do we need to name it, or what do you suggest?
So here's in my experience what's the truth about that, and that is that if people have never done any of their own personal work, and they're usually like, oh, I don't have any of that stuff. And then they get hit with it.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of important for them to at least have an intellectual understanding that that's probably a fear, and maybe it's a fear because it's a release for them to even go, oh my God, I actually have a fear that I'm going to fail here.
Right.
And it's like, they didn't even know that. For people who are already aware that some of those things exist, I agree with you. I don't think you know the feeling, you know what it is. Right. You say, okay, I get it. Oh, don't like that, but
yeah.
Move it through.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that, again, it's the opportunity for people who haven't looked at a lot of that stuff to be able to be a little more aware and honest about what's going on inside of them. Because people who aren't, and who would take something like that and just ratchet it up, and maybe take it out, a leader that might take it out on the people who work for him or her or whatever, they're just taking the stuff that's inside of them, they're just dumping it on other people. It's not going to make for a successful business eventually. I mean, people may work for you, but they won't like you.
Exactly. And because I think we've seen people, they go through, it's an assembly line of people coming in and people going out. The boss that can never keep staff. The company that continually has high attrition. That there's some
absolutely. And when I went, and let me roll back for a minute, because I heard myself saying they won't like you. I'm not talking about a popularity contest. I'm talking about the fact that a leader who just normally takes what's not okay about them and forces it onto the people that work for them is really just not a healthy environment. I mean, it doesn't even matter you like them or you don't, or her. It matters that, do you want to work in an environment where you're not being seen, because really most of what's going on is that the leader in that business is really just playing out their stuff on you.
Yeah. And that phrase, it's not about me, it's about them. It's not always about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Sometimes we have these euphemisms, and now I'm seeing there is a psychology behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, it has been fabulous speaking with you this last half hour. As we wrap up Encore Chat, are there any words of advice? What's the best, or actually any closing words of advice, and then the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, the closing words for advice for people that are entrepreneurs, either starting out or working in their business, is really a lot of acceptance. I'm going to repeat about the beginner's mind. You have to have you have to be able to kind of shut that other stuff out for a while and just say, I'm in a learning process here. Enough stuff will come up anyway. It doesn't matter what you do. Okay. But if you start with an acceptance that you're on an adventure. Okay? You're on an adventure, and you're not always sure what you're going to run into on that adventure, and that's okay. That's okay. It's really okay. It's not personal when somebody doesn't sign up or doesn't return your phone call, or, to just kind of accept that that's part of the whole deal. And when you do get triggered, when you do have a reaction to something, to get whatever help you might need. And lots of coaches are great at this. I sometimes do what I call therapeutic coaching, which is essentially blending therapy and coaching, so that I can really work at a deeper level if people really want to just get in there and let it go fully. So the best way to reach me is to contact me probably via email at linda@aradicalshift.com. Don't forget the A. Everybody forgets the A. They put linda@radicalshift.com. I won't get it. So aradicalshift.com. Or you can contact me at 858-876-5190. or my website, aradicalshift.com.
Great. And for those who missed the first half of this, we've been talking about the entrepreneur's mindset and what to expect on that entrepreneurial journey. I'll have a recording of this up. So thank you for joining us. I see the telephone number 614. Thank you. I'm sorry you didn't catch the top of the show, but again, I'll have this as a recording. Again, this is Judi Bonilla with Encore Chat with Linda O'Keefe. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Judi.
You're welcome.
That's great.